Buffs are on. Paul Bunyan up at East Lansing, and Michigan's coming home with a victory over Michigan State, 31-20. Thanks so much for joining us as it was a late one in East Lansing. This is the Michigan Postgame Live. We're here after every Michigan football game. And on the road games, we're here, and you can come in and leave messages and be part of the show. This was jump right into it. This was a game where Michigan left a lot out there. You thought that maybe they could have won this one by a lot more, especially after the way they played in the first quarter, the way they were getting after Michigan State. It was all Michigan in the first quarter, came back, it was all Michigan State in the second quarter, and you're sitting there at 10-7 at the half, and State fans are feeling like they've got nothing going for them, and they're down 3 points. Maybe they're in for a dogfight. Well, then Michigan, who won the coin toss and deferred to the second half, the biggest series, certainly the one that, if it was controversial, it's the one that's going to be talked about the most. It was the biggest. It was the first series of the second half, where you've got Bryce Underwood fumbling the ball after, Justice Haynes was, had ripped off a couple nice runs, and Michigan's looking good. And then Underwood gets strip sacked, and Michigan State recovers, and it's just a huge momentum. But a flag on the play, offsides Michigan State. Now, look, to me, you're a Michigan fan. You look at it, you say, oh, yep, by a hair, he was offsides, he was in the neutral zone, and, you've had a million calls go against you. So it's not like you're sitting around, trying to say the one thing that that it was very close, and that could have gone either way. When you have a linesman, the one thing about camera angles and everything else, that you don't have a camera angle right down the line. I see a lot of people, showing the snap and looking like the player had timed it up. And it does kind of look like that. And there's other people saying, no, you don't know. When they're in the neutral zone, that's what matters. And, you see all that. But, for me, you get an official, a linesman who's right down the line. And that's part of his job. I mean, that's what he's looking at. He's looking at the snap, and, he's going to have the best angle on that. And he threw the flag, and a lot of Michigan State fans, they're in meltdown mode. That they said that he had waited to throw the flag after Underwood fumbled. I didn't see that part. It looked like he threw it. I'm back at a replay. I actually didn't see it, but enough people said that he did throw it. That he did throw the flag right away. It's the biggest play of the game. Do I think Michigan would have lost the game if it didn't get? Maybe. It was a gigantic play. It was a huge swing. A couple plays later, Michigan goes in and they make it 17-7. So it's a big swing, and how things went down. I'd just say this: if you put yourself into the Michigan State fans' shoes, and you've been there where the shoe's been on the other foot a million times for Michigan, where you just don't seem like you can get a call. The calls seem like they're going against you, whether you thought they were or not. There was a HAUSMANN call. There was a Zeke Berry who got there a little bit early. It happens every time. I tend to think things like that even out. People don't like to really hear that. They want to go to some kind of Chauncey Billups or the Mafia or the refs or in on it, scripted, Connor Stallions, blowback, all these different things. But, not in the first half, Michigan got a favorable whistle, which had State again, completely, thinking that, they're getting screwed. And then that happened. And, you would have thought that Michigan would have been screwed that way. So, it worked out for Michigan that way. And again, it was very close. The linesman was right there, and he made the call. And it wouldn't have been a big deal if Underwood wouldn't have fumbled, it would have just been the 5 yards and everything else. But it just so happened that it was the turning point in the game, and the officials were right there. I wouldn't put up a big stink. After you see it and you're a State fan, it's probably pretty hard to block out everything that happened in the first half and just look at that and say, man, he almost timed it up. I mean, he was so close. It's hard to say that. It's hard to say that. So that's what I saw on the offsides call where Underwood got stripped. Michigan, I don't know if they, you catch a break when they're offsides because, Underwood had no idea. He's supposed to know. I did see the receiver basically saying, look, you've got a guy coming in, and, Sprague had nothing to do with it. He had his own assignment. And so the guy's coming in, that's on the quarterback. He's got to get rid of it. But, and that takes me to the quarterback in Underwood. Underwood is a freshman and he's going to be fabulous and he's got all the talent. These are things that we've said since the beginning. He can do everything. You just put him out there on the field, but everything that it involves playing the game, playing the position, you see it come out on the road. I think he's going to continue to get the snap and run around and throw the ball from all these different angles and back and away. That's how the position is developing overall, but it's tough when you do that and you can't stay in the pocket and deliver the ball. That's the number one thing you need to be able to do as a quarterback. All the other stuff, is nice. Being able to throw split-legged and off balance and all these things from different angles and off different platforms and all of that. But being able to be sound with your footwork and be able to deliver the ball is the most important thing. And we've seen it where he struggles with that on the road. And that should be expected, especially when you're doing all this other, crazy stuff when you throw the ball. But, he gets better. All of these games, the experience, and when you win, you'll be able to move on, and they've got very winnable games in front of them. And, the sky's the limit for the guy. But, he didn't have any rhythm early on. He threw some to McCULLEY and, I don't know, over his head, running around, spinning around, throwing them to him. He's got something going with Marsh. That's a nice connection. But they didn't win this game because of Bryce Underwood. But, he's the one that you tuck away and say, this is a learning experience for, the greatest ever on the road, and he's going to get better. And then you don't sit around and harp on it too much. That's my feelings on Underwood. You can argue it. You can say whatever you want. That's how I felt about him. HAYNES is awesome. He is an explosive running back. He is a dangerous running back. He's going to be an NFL running back. Tremendous player. I don't think he's 100% coming back after getting hurt from USC, but the big time plays that he can make, he was making them again, and then he fumbles at the end. So excellent to have HAYNES back. Nice to see the explosive running, and he can't be fumbling in the fourth quarter. He knows that. We all know that. So what else are you going to say? Great job, terrible job, but you move forward from there. They've got two really good running backs, and it's not a thunder and lightning or a thunder and thunder. You've got a lightning in HAYNES, and you do have a little bit of tough running, tough sledding, a guy that can fall forward, and also one who can get out and show some explosiveness as well with Jordan Marshall. And that's how on offense Michigan was able to get it done. Now on defense, I've gone a long time without saying Jimmy Rolder. Jimmy Rolder played one of the better games that in recent history from an individual standpoint, from a Michigan defensive player. Maybe there'll be a few that would come to mind. I was kind of thinking about Jordan when he went up and snagged that ball against Wisconsin and came down with it. That ended up being pretty a great game for him. But Rolder, it was the first series where Childs almost throws an interception. Shug Hill should have had it. And then it was Rolder who ended up getting the fumble recovery. Rolder who came up big on that fourth down where they should have kicked a field goal. I don't know what Michigan State was thinking there. They weren't. Michigan State, I don't know, they go for two. You can sit around with math people and chart people and football people, and you can sit around arguing. That's a nice bar argument. You're sitting around. I'll have another one. You get somebody who likes math and will start telling you how smart he is and how, this is the analytics, and you get other people that kind of like, no, that's not really how it goes. And you can sit around and discuss that until the cows come home. But the Rolder was tremendous, and the defense was pretty good for the majority of the game. They give up that big I was going to say 50-yard run, 49-yard run in the second quarter, but they're doing all right. But as soon as you get great field position, Michigan's at the 50, they march it down there. Justice Haynes scores a touchdown. I mean, Michigan's dominating this game, and you think it's over at 24-7, but then MSU, I was going to say, to their credit, I don't know if it's to their credit. I mean, they came up, they woke up a little bit and scored a touchdown, but I would suggest that their momentum got a little sapped there when they tried to go for two and couldn't get it. And then also, then they get super aggressive on a 4th and 3 when they could have kicked a 45-yard field goal. I mean, if I'm Jonathan Smith, I got to stand up there and answer that. What am I going to say? Well, I really thought that we wanted to, seize the momentum, whatever. We thought it was, we didn't think getting within 8 with a 1-score game was the way to do it when we had everything going. I don't know. He's not going to be around, but I'll weigh in on Jonathan Smith. It's always easy to say from the other side, say, oh yeah, I hope he stays around forever. I wouldn't fire a guy. Everybody's like, this is the way it goes now. Fire him, get him out there. It's not getting any better. You got all these other schools out there like Penn State. There's 3 or 4 other job openings that are better than Michigan State. So automatically, when they fire him, State's going to be down the list like 5th or 6th. And I know their fans don't care. They're like, go find another Signetti or find someone. I got Michigan State friends texting me, saying, make the defensive coordinator the head coach. At least he shows fire. And, you have to admit when you're watching it and, here's Jonathan Smith on the sideline all game. I'm just sitting here emotionless. And you sit over there, the defensive coordinator, he's fired up. He's shaking, guys. You have to have a little bit of that. I love Tom Landry, the Dallas Cowboys coach, way back in the day, but you're gonna pick on anybody that that's losing and go after them, but you have to admit it's not very inspiring. Smith just standing there on the sideline, and every time you look at him, he's just standing there. And yeah, he's talking to somebody on the headset. It doesn't show very much emotion, and it's a game of emotion. You think you'd have to show a little bit more than that, but he doesn't. But who cares? I think they will probably I don't know, is it caving to the pressure, or somebody got the money and is going to say, yeah, get him out of there? You might see the defensive coordinator for the rest of the year, but no, this is a game here where Michigan, if they play like this, will they be able to beat Purdue and Northwestern? I think, yeah. I think those, I don't know, call any game easy, but those are very winnable. Maryland is a little, I'd say tricky, a little bit of a wild card. It is on the road. They've got a freshman quarterback, that's, and they play well, but fold. So they're kind of that's the wild card with them. What if they could put together 4 quarters? I know Michigan, same thing. What if they could put together 4 quarters? Maybe they could beat Michigan State. But I think when you just look at these remaining 3 games before OSU, Michigan should win these games. And then I'm sitting here saying, we'll see. I'm not talking about, they got a, but they have had Ohio State's number. I mean, as I sit here, if I'm going to be real, as I've watched Michigan play all year long, I've watched the offense, especially, and to sit here tonight and say, they're going to beat Ohio State, but because you've watched Ohio State play this year. But last year, I thought they were going to get killed. I mean, Michigan had no quarterback, and they went on the road, and they beat Ohio State with not much at the quarterback position. And I know the argument, like, Ohio State's not going to be so dumb, or whatever you want to say there. Fine, whatever, fine. But there will be a lot of people that think that Michigan is in with a puncher's chance. They're at home. Underwood with another 3 games under his belt, what he might be able to bring to the table. Michigan's definitely in Ohio State's head. So, we'll see. So I think I've covered everything that went on in this game. ROLDER, Michigan's defense. I would also I would have to go back and, I say I watched the film, but, Nick Marsh was held down pretty good by Jair Hill, who seemed like he was on him most of the time. And then the one almost touchdown from Marsh where they ended up scoring a play later. I don't know, miscommunication, bad defense, whatever it was. I mean, Hill looked like he got suckered on a maybe, he thought, Marsh was going to come back for the ball, and that's all it takes. And then he's gone. But, you could see that he was a little bit upset with the help that didn't get there. So maybe he thought he had something else. I don't know. But overall, he looked pretty good out there. Already mentioned, the Michigan defensive line. I mean, they were crushing them. They were all over them. And then, the big one was, that the first half touchdown, the 49-yard run, made it a 10-7 game. But when you're up 24-7, you can flex a little bit, and they didn't seem like they were going to be in danger. But then when you fumble the ball, and, next thing you know, you're sitting there and it's, 24-13, and, you go 3 and out, and you're thinking, maybe this could be a little bit closer, but it wasn't. And Michigan wins it. And I think overall, you feel pretty good if you're a Michigan fan. They got a little work to do. I don't think you're sitting around saying, this offense is a college football playoff offense, but they were always going to be an offense that had to improve week by week and get better when you've got a freshman quarterback. It's always going to be that way. And so that is the way it is. And that's where we sit. So let's see what the people have to say. Jerry says there's no passing game. It's unacceptable. Well, Jerry, what do we say? Is it, do I think it's on the coaches? Do you think it's on the coaches that Michigan know that? I think it's on Underwood. And if I had, I think it sounds easy to say because he's a true freshman, which is true. And it is what I think, that the position is so demanding and it's so difficult that expecting him to throw the ball like he does at home or at other times, there's going to be a lot of inconsistency there because of that. The coaches can always do. I don't want to sit here giving the coaches a free pass or anything like that. But he's a live wire in that when you snap him the ball, he doesn't just sit there in the pocket. He's running around. He's, you know, he's throwing the ball all over the place from all these different angles. And, maybe it's all going to click in. We've seen it click at times already this year. And I think everybody believes it will click in where he'll have all this, he's super dynamic, but against teams on the road and when everybody's screaming at you and it's hard to get everything else going, he's showing some of those problems. Smash is talking about beating MSU and Desmond Howard and those kind of things happen in this game. That's the thing. If you're a Michigan fan and you were talking to a Michigan State fan, you could say, oh yeah, that call, you could say, how old are you? Because there've been calls and I don't know if they even up over a course of a game, a decade, a lifetime. In 2021, the last time Michigan State won, that was a great game. Remember it being 30-30 with 8 minutes to go. And I said, no, this is a great game. No matter what happens, Michigan State won it. And I didn't think it was all that great of a game. But you had the Aiden Hutchinson call that went through the review and everything else. And Michigan fans were beside themselves because they had the replay and it ended up like, oh no, it was his shin or everything else. And, felt like Michigan got screwed on that call. I can remember they were playing it in the pregame where, Smoker was throwing it to duck it. But, that was a big call in the history of this series and in college football because teams prior to that, when the clock was running down, you did not have referees moving with alacrity to get the ball spotted like they were in that game and having these shot clock type situations. It just happened in that game. And so that was a break for MSU, and Smash is mentioning, Desmond Howard. So, okay. What about those calls? Those were all more egregious than a timing and, oh man, it was pretty close, really close. We could all agree with that. It's a little bit like, and Michigan fans won't like this one, but the JT being short, and then he was called for the first down in what was that, 2016, right? 2018. And Michigan fans to this day, he was short. Well, the truth was it was just bang, bang, and is absolutely as close as you could possibly be. And if you were, and nobody is a completely objective bystander who's able to evaluate those things, but yeah, Michigan, that easily could have gone Michigan's way. And if you were on the Ohio State side, you could be like, oh, he looked like he got him, but man, it was really close. It was the same way with this offsides. It was really close. They didn't have to, you could, but it wasn't egregious. It was close. So that's it. I think some of these are from the pregame. So let's get in here. And LJ says, a game like this gives me ulcers. I've already mentioned that myself, if I was a Michigan State fan, I would give Jonathan Smith another year. I admit freely that he doesn't inspire much confidence, and a lot of it has to do with his sideline demeanor. He just, he doesn't bring any fire, any emotion to the game. Vince is saying it was back to bully ball for a nice win. A lot of work to do, but a good win. MSU gave us their best shot. It's a nice way to, and that's Vince. It's perfect the way you said it. Nice synopsis of the game. Good to see you, Robbie. Brad is saying Rolder look legit, but why can't we put teams away unless it's a MAC team? Yeah. Well, why can't they put teams away? Well, so I don't know. Nick Marsh is pretty good. You get a desperate team. You've got, what do they have there? 17 points to play with? Wait, 24. I mean, they're up 17. You are going to, whether it's human nature or actually Wink saying, dialing it back a little bit, try to keep people in front. So maybe you can run some clock, and you play differently, you coach differently, and you play differently when you're up by more than 2 scores. So why can't they put a team away on the road? Well, they don't have something flying around in the studio. You can't. They're a work in progress on offense, and then they turned it over, and then you're naturally going to, as a player and as a coach differently and play differently when you're up double digits. That'd be my answer to that. Lots to clean up. I like that one. Passing game didn't look good. Yeah, I don't know. Can they clean that up? That's the question. Clean it up. Can it get better? He's got a little something going with Marsh, and I don't know, McCULLEY. Where was that? They were targeting him. They're going to him, and it didn't happen. Donovan McCULLEY was supposed to be wide receiver number 1. Where are the tight ends? I don't know where they're at. I don't know why they couldn't get that going. I don't know what they're doing with Samaj Morgan. Samaj Morgan is someone who, he might be like really, I don't know. I've never talked with him. I don't know much. I mean, I've watched him play football for Michigan. He had a really good freshman year in the national championship year. All the receivers, get a pass from last year because they didn't have a quarterback. But Morgan just doesn't play a heady game. They got him out there, and you need a guy that can, protect the ball and be able to make the smart plays for you when he's in punt return. He does the opposite. When you're on the 5-yard line and the ball's going over your head, it's pretty easy for me to say, but you're supposed to do it. You don't catch the ball. And he has his 7th drop. He can't catch the ball. He can catch it. You're not supposed to catch it on the 5, and you are supposed to catch it when it hits you right in the head or right in the 0. And, 7 drops is too much, but that's got to tell you something. They couldn't get McCULLEY 1 catch for 9 yards. It's a lot of it to do with Underwood and the receivers. Remember, if you go back and if you were listening to this podcast all summer when it came to Michigan, say there are 3 big questions with this team. One is the quarterback, one is the wide receiver, and one is the offensive line. And the quarterback is dynamic, but he's a work in progress. The receivers, they're not great. Marsh is good. He's a true freshman. Going to have some ups and downs. McCULLEY will make a play every other game. He can jump to the moon, but I don't want to say, with the disappointment, but he was a disappointment. If you're looking at just overall, yeah, I would say that he's a disappointment. No tight ends caught a pass. I'm sorry, Klein caught 1 for 4. I don't know. Is that just something you can clean up? Or is that something that because of the quarterback and the receivers, the age of the quarterback and the talent and age of the receivers that's, I don't know. You want to say, it's coaching. Maybe you want to say a little bit, but I think it's a talent and inexperience thing when it comes down to that. Noah Eagle seems to hate Michigan. Yeah, James, here's the thing. I think that I think every announcer that you come across, you're going to think hates Michigan. Jake Butt doesn't hate Michigan. He does a good job on the broadcast. Doug Karsh, John Jansen, those guys like Michigan. Everybody else hates Michigan. I don't know what else you want to say about that. Mike Tirico seems like he likes Michigan. Remember when Mike Tirico was the Chiefs game, something after that? And, it was the first game when they beat the Chiefs, and Tirico said something like, they beat a shorthanded Chiefs team, and the Lion fans were ready to, run Mike Tirico. How dare he? But look, yeah, he hates him. Not sure how we take such a step back on offense against that bad defense. Yeah, I don't know. The quarterback didn't look very sharp to me. And the receivers didn't look that sharp. Oh, yeah. You mean you expected more than 86 yards from Bryce Underwood? Me too. The team is young. They play young. They act young. Bryce also should not be taking selfies with the fans before the game's over. Come on, grow up. I think there's a point to that. If you were the coach, Dave, maybe you wouldn't get Bryce Underwood. I don't know if there's a part to that too, but yeah, I would rather have, if you want to have some fun after the game, with the fans, with Michigan fans. It's more like the pros. Sometimes you see it in the pros, but yeah, I would rather, that not happen myself. I don't know if that makes me, I don't know how old you are, Dave, but maybe that's making us like, old dudes talking football. Hey, the game's over. Let them have some fun. I mean, I don't even know. This is just, you're talking about, Dave's talking about taking selfies, whether it's a big deal or not when the game's still going. I don't know about how big of a deal is. Like I said, I wouldn't like it. I don't know how much I like the backflips after the game, but the reason I don't like those is because I think Shamari Earls was doing that in the first game, in the pregame, and he ended up getting hurt. Got to let players celebrate, but I don't know. All good until you do a backflip and ran on your ankle. I don't know. Vince is hearkening back to 21 and 22. Squeeze the life out of opponents and run the ball with authority. Scott says Sharon is handcuffing the offense. There's a lot of people that think that. When you go 3 and out, I see a lot of Chip Lindsey doesn't know what the hell he's doing, and I see a lot of, Sharon is, just telling him to run the ball up the middle. Sharon's putting the handcuffs on the Underwood. I don't know. To me, the person that handcuffed the offense tonight was Underwood. I mean, if we're going to sit around and anoint the guy, the greatest quarterback of all time, and everything that he does, just, how perfect he is, and he's so, he was not perfect tonight, and he struggled. He was part of the problem against Oklahoma. He was part of the problem against USC. He wasn't all that good, and he wasn't all that good tonight. I mean, he did some nice things. He looked fantastic on the touchdown run that he had. He protected the football. Those things are good. And he ran the team. But, when it came to, throwing the ball, not so hot. And I know you could chalk up McCULLEY to dropping one. And obviously Morgan dropped one. But and you say, well, the offensive line and pass protection, I don't know, he gets the ball and he just starts running around. I think that if I'm talking about, this is just for me looking at it, you can be a lot of former players and all kinds of film experts and everything else that watch things. But my opinion is that they need to hone that in when he's catching the ball on a snap, instead of it feels like to me the first thing that he's trying to do is he's getting it. Let me go juke around and let me throw one sidearmed off my back leg. I would like let's stay with our footwork. Let's look at a read. Let's look at a second read. And then let's, if you want to use some escapability, then let's go to that. And sure, sometimes you're going to call some rollouts, you're going to do some different things, but it appears that he's always throwing with it's not showboat. That was coming with mustard. I think that he likes to throw the ball with flair. And that's not always what you need as a quarterback. You just need to deliver it. And a lot of times, set feet in the pocket, that's what's getting it done. But for the last 10 years, he's been going to camps and he's been 20 times better than everybody else. Now he's just like 2 or 3 times better than everyone else. And so he wants to be Superman. He wants to jump up and show everyone that's his game. It's a little bit like, you see a point guard, you say, just, no, I really do so. Let's just see a chest pass. Let's just see a bounce pass. Not everything has to be around the back, between the legs, no look, but with Underwood, I think that's part of his game. You're going to take that away from him as a coach? No selfies, no split-legged back throws. Let's, harness you in the pocket. It's like, what are you dealing with? You got to deal with it. Riley says the corner was offsides, was not offsides, but I'll take it. Yeah, I've gone through that. Go back to the beginning of the show. I mean, I went through that for 5 minutes and gave you my thoughts. It was close. Could have gone either way. People don't really like that. So you do have a linesman right there. I completely understand how Michigan State was in complete meltdown mode because of it. And here's the hard thing. If you're a State fan, so State fans their whole life, in the first half too, all these calls, I mean, they just think the refs are out to get them. So when they see that, and they know that they lost, look, the game was over after that, even though it actually wasn't, but, it was just the first series of the second half, but there was nothing, that was the biggest play of the game. And it could have gone either way. And it went Michigan's way. And Michigan got a favorable whistle in the first half. So if you're a State fan, that's a hard pill to swallow. But Michigan fans are like, bad calls, welcome to our world. We've seen it in this particular series. So you're not going to get much sympathy from a Michigan fan who has seen calls go against them against Michigan State in that stadium a million times. Dave says you got to set these young players up for success, not failure. Overall, you're right. The coaches got to do a better job with Underwood. They've got to pull the best out of him. I can sit around talking about all kinds of things. Your general Michigan fan's not going to want to say anything critical about Bryce Underwood. That's completely understandable too. So it's the coach. They got to coach him better. They got to put him in better positions. If it was me and it was, let's say, Nathan and Ted, we might bench Samaj. We might, tell Bryce, no backflips, no selfies. Let's stay in the pocket. Next thing you know, he might be on the phone like, I'm out of here. I don't know. Scott says Sharon's calling the plays. Maybe let's get Biff back in there. He'll open things up. Here's the thing when it comes down to play calling. I actually do not believe that Sharon is calling the plays. I think during the week they have a plan on what they want to do. Now, I looked at all the numbers and I thought they should have been jamming it down Michigan State's throat. They couldn't stop anyone. UCLA scored 31 points on them. You could roll it up on Michigan State. So whatever their game plan is, does Sharon have a say on how they're going to attack? He's going to be in there. He's the head coach. I think all head coaches, any good head coach, is in there with his offensive coordinator and is talking about shaping the game plan. But when they put the headsets on, yeah, there's communication with Lindsay. They have a script of plays, but the part where it's not going, and so here's I'm kind of talking in circles here. It always comes back to the head coach no matter what happens. So yeah, he has the power to do everything. So ultimately, criticizing Sharon is fair game if you want better from the offense and you want better from Bryce Underwood. I will look what I would say a little deeper and say that you have a quarterback that it's not just let him cook. Just go out there, let him do whatever, do whatever he wants. Let him, throw bombs every down. Getting a quarterback in rhythm and an offensive rhythm, it's as a play caller, it's something where when you see it work well and you say, man, this guy really can call the plays. And when you don't, and you look at him and say, don't know what he's doing. And it looked like that a lot of times with Lindsay. And I would say it was mostly on the quarterback. I like Bryce Underwood. I think that he's going to be great. He's not great on the road. And part of it is his, the way he plays the game. Run, pass attempt, scramble, punt. I would say it's sometimes pass on first down. Go look at it, Scott. They probably threw it as much as they ran it. And this game, maybe they didn't because the game plan was Michigan State can't stop the run. I would have agreed with that. I was thinking they probably should have ran it more. But when there was pass attempts, there's not a lot of let me just stay in the pocket and deliver the ball. It's even on a screen. Let me roll over here 5 yards and kind of throw it where it's like, does that need to happen? Where you got to, throw a hook shot off your back leg? And I would say right off the bat, some of that stuff. You got a quarterback with that likes to, play with a lot of pizzazz. Are you going to take that away from him? Look like last year's offense? Yeah. Dave doesn't agree that Moore's calling the plays. It's a myth. Yeah, I don't think so either. But I mean, also, David, it comes back. He can do whatever it's ultimately the head coach. So if he does not like how the plays are being called, he can change things up. Dan is giving it the prudent approach here. I haven't read it. I just read the first sentence, but I think that's what he's doing. He says, we expect a lot from our team. The reality is a win here, and we move on with all of our goals intact. We find a way to beat OSU again, and we will find ourselves in the college football playoff. I think that's right. That's it. Win out. Sharon's Lindsay has his idea and his play sheet, and then Sharon at the last walks up to him before the game says, "Give me the sheet. Give me the sheet. We're going with. Here's Lindsay's plan. Nope. Chip, we are not doing that. Here's my plan. And it's what Scott says. Run, scramble. That's Sharon's game plan. I think you just got to take that. There's a lot that goes into it. You know, we're just sitting around kicking it around after the win on this now Sunday morning. Todd didn't like the performance against a terrible team, but he'll take the W. Yeah, I think you'll feel better about it in the morning if you were fired up during the game. Now, as much as I'm on Samaj myself, calling him trash, he needs to go. Special teams, that stuff is going to cost us a game. Now, I am going to agree with the last part. JS, Samaj Morgan, they keep him as a wide receiver and as a punt returner because in that 5'10" frame is a playmaking dynamo. And we've seen some of it. Saw him in the Big Ten championship game with that big punt return. We've seen some other, plays, but it's an adventure with him on special teams. He doesn't have I don't know if it's a temperament. It's not, I don't even know if it's, you say the head for the game. It goes all the way back to the opener. The opener, was one punt where he was looking this way, and then he was kind of turning around in circles. And I've never seen anybody do that. So how in the world would they ever allow him to do that? And then there was another game where, there's a live punt. He's diving on it in the middle. It's like, there's another thing. You never ever think about doing that. A lot of other punts, he doesn't seem to be the greatest of judge when it's a tough position. I can tell you that. I mean, not from any experience or anything. It's just tough. You got to punt. You got to decide whether I need to come up and catch it or whether I stay away from it. Doesn't seem like he's very good at that, on being a judge of that. And again, it's tough. But when you're making, and I put him in the boneheaded category, when you're standing on your own 5 and the ball's going over your head, you should never, where's J.B. Brown? These guys, J.B. Brown's the special teams coach when he's asked about it, and Sharon's asked about Samaj. He's always like, these guys act like there's, that he's not making bonehead plays. So your last part about this, I don't, you call them names if you want. That's whatever. You can do that. But the part where you say this stuff is going to cost Michigan a game is what everybody thinks. So if Michigan beats Purdue, Northwestern, and Maryland, and they play Ohio State, and a punt comes back and Samaj Morgan muffs it, and now he's going to look down. Everybody's going to feel real bad for him. That's when you're going to look over at the coach and say, well, what do you expect? From the beginning of the year, this guy's just not been in it. He has not been connected. He has not been engaged. He is making error after error routinely, and every single person that watches the team understands that he's a playmaker, but also understands that he is going to cost you a game. And so when he muffs one against Ohio State and he loses the game for you, well, then what are we going to say? What were you thinking, Sharon? And a coach will say, well, you guys all say that stuff. No, everybody's been saying it all year long. So this is a win. For some reason, Shannon Goodwin's got kind of the same thing. How many games you run into him once? He ran into him. I remember it was Biff was the head coach. So it must have been the CMU game. And Biff said, we're going to clean that up. Well, they haven't cleaned it up. Shannon Goodwin should not be out on punt return. He doesn't know. I don't know what the exact, you can get some coaches, you get some players, people that coach special teams. But what I know is you're not supposed to be running in friendly fire and tackling and knocking your own player off of their spot. Well, Goodwin's done it more than once. He would be another one that would be out of there, at least on punt return. Yeah, this is what I think. Stand in the pocket and take a hit, Bryce. I mean, he takes big hits when he runs. Stand in the pocket. JS is on with the punter. Yeah, well, Hollenbach is not having a good year. Way too inconsistent. In practice, according to Sharon Moore, he's blasting him 50 yards and getting 4.9 hang time. But he can't bring it to the game. So the guy that they got in the transfer portal, the kid from Penn, and they got a couple other guys. That could cost him a game too. Todd says he's okay. Reminds me of Morton. We'll see next year. I think we're talking about Chip Lindsey. He's okay. Rolder was fire. That's true. Robbie says, surprise, we went away from targeting the tight ends after so much success last week. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what their game plan was with it. I don't have the targets and how they went about it. They went to McCULLEY early, and it wasn't happening. Now you look over and over again here. Michigan, 3 and out, 4 and out. Now Marsh had a 22-yard grab. This is one thing. This is one thing that's probably the coaches probably watch us and say, you know what? What did you think of our third drive in the first quarter to open the game? I'd say, man, you guys look like you had some rhythm and had something going. You had Morgan on a reverse. You had Marshall banging through, falling forward. And then you had Underwood go in, and he had the Paul Bunyan pose. Now, I like the Paul Bunyan pose. You know, I was talking about no selfies, and I don't really care for the backflips and everything else. I know. But I like the Bunyan pose. I mean, that was cool. But I thought, you know, they had that throwback screen. I don't really care for the, you know, doing it off the back foot, but it was pretty effective. It was a great drive. Michigan in games against USC in the first, they had a great drive. But you need more of that. And I know it's hard, but I also know these guys, they're in the business of doing hard things and in being one of the better teams. 3 and out. Snap over the Underwood's head. Samaj drops the ball. 3 and out. Just goes through that. But a good W for Michigan. I know you might be tuning in and say, what are you going to do? Cry? MSU fans are getting mad. You know, hey, look, I'm sure they are getting mad. I'm sure if you're a Michigan State, if you're a Michigan State fan at Sunday morning at 12:20 and you're talking about the game, you're not going to be in a good mood. You know, you're gonna go to the typical insults. Darius says I might be crazy, but I like Marshall more than I like Haynes. No, I don't think you're crazy. But Marshall, the last 2 games, has done a great job. JS hard on the special teams. Yeah, special teams in the punting and punt return, they get Fs. Although you're right, it goes down. I mean, it's maybe JB Brown and say, "Oh, what a great punt!" How come you're not, congratulating Holland back about the great punt? Yeah, he had a good one. The guy should have caught it. Best game for Rolder. Yeah, it was a great game for Rolder. Ferris says it doesn't matter if they won 5-3 or 49-0. Weird things happen in the MSU game. Well, there is part of that. Look, I think you can watch Michigan. You can be very happy with the win. I think everybody should, be ecstatic about the win. Now, if you bet Michigan minus 14, that was my pick to cover the 14.5 points. And I thought that I was going to look pretty smart, but, I don't feel good about that. But I mean, you got to separate that. If you're upset about them not covering, you're upset because, you had 86 passing yards and you're hoping that in the back half of the season that you could have had a lot more, that they could have taken a big step forward in the passing department, especially after the Washington game, because things were looking pretty good. Underwood had played his best game of the year. Now he plays, takes a step back from that. The up and down nature of that, what he has. A lot of people liking what Jordan Marshall did. Justice Haynes is explosive, dynamic back, but he fumbled. That's what you don't like. Defense, a B+, and a tough grader in JS. John Smith. I don't know. Whenever you're dealing with any John Smith, I don't know, Jonathan Smith, John L. Smith, just a straight John Smith. I guess, it's a pretty common name. Both Smith and John. What's your middle initial, John? We'll call it M because he's got a Michigan avatar up there. John Michigan Smith says the game was never in doubt. Well, I got to tell you, I'm sitting there at the half where Michigan has got a 3-point lead, and I thought they should have been up, by 20. And then I thought it was over when Haynes scored again, and it was 24-7. I thought it was over then. But I got to tell you that when Michigan went MSU, they get their big drive and they get a touchdown, Michigan goes 3 and out. Now that's when Rolder stepped up. I mean, you're into the fourth quarter. I thought the game was in doubt after a 3 and out, but Michigan's defense rose to the occasion. That's what I was looking at. No reason to force the passing game. Yeah, the passing game, the running game, Michigan ran for 276 yards and threw for 86. So, yeah, running game, you'd give them an A, but then Haynes fumbled. And then there were probably too many 3 and outs for my liking. But, running game, A-, passing game. Did they make were there any good throws? I mean, he hooked up with Marsh once and a 22-yard grab. Hit him for 27. So 2 to Marsh looked pretty good. Other than that, we're talking about that flip screen, the sky hook screen to Haynes. I don't know. The C- seems generous. I got to give it a D. Want to give it lower than that? Maybe D-. The defensive coordinator for State is a beast. Yeah, they'll probably be their head coach on Monday. That would be my guess. Let's go here and see if we've got. I guess we could take these all day long. I did see. Let's see if we can move it through here for a couple. Michigan go blue 1, 2, 3, 4. Gets in. Well, I saw Purdue lost to Rutgers. Purdue's got a young quarterback. The Michigan's going to probably be favored by 21 or more points against Purdue. I think they should blow Purdue out of the stadium. Launch them to the moon. That game should be over by halftime, but I think that they'll win that game comfortably. I also think that they will go to Wrigley Field, great venue to watch that game, and I also think that they'll beat Northwestern by 20 points or more. So then we're getting to the Maryland game. And I think they're going to win that game. I know it's got people worried. People are worried about everything, but I think that's a very winnable game. I know it's on the road, so you get Underwood, but get that running game of the 1-2 punch that they have. That's it. We're sitting here. I'm going to get to the end and see if there's anybody that's just coming in. SW Alliance. He's big basketball and football guy. He says, I thought we were going to get some creativity with Lindsey, but all I see is Underwood and shotgun at every play. Do they not believe in under the center with play action at all? Well, that might be a product. I don't think Underwood took a snap under center in high school. When he took a snap under center in the spring game, he fumbled it. He recovered it, but so he's not comfortable. When you put a player, whether it's under center, I know you want to do some different things, or he's in shotgun, you want to have what's going to be most comfortable for the quarterback. A lot of these quarterbacks, when they're under center, you hear because they got to keep their head up and they're looking for the routes and they got a lot of things going on. It's a lot easier to survey for some can do it all. That if you don't have that experience, it's more difficult when you're backing up rather than you get the ball and all things are going on there. So I would think that they may have worked on that a little bit, but they're going to go at the comfort level of the quarterback. That's it. Why don't Bell or O'Leary start? I don't know. The last time I saw Bell, he's part of the drop brigade, so I would imagine that he's got some slippery fingers in practice. And then O'Leary, O'Leary was the star of the 22 spring game. And he caught the miracle pass against Ohio State. What has O'Leary done to make anybody think? Who you starting him? Starting him? Dave says Sullivan didn't go back in. It almost looked like an arm injury. Hope it isn't broken. He was in a sling. Let me see if I got an update on him. Angelique Shengelis tweet saw Cole Sullivan on the sideline with a left arm sling. I saw Trey Pierce limping off. Rod Moore didn't play in this game. Yeah, Sullivan, that's a huge injury when it comes down to it. We'll take a couple more here if you want to get in. You got your point. I'm going to see if I can put all of my thoughts together. Kendrick Bell hasn't had nearly the chance to show anything. Goodwin had his chance. Samanas had way too many chances. Yeah, well, when Bell wasn't there, he dropped. He had a drop. So, look, you don't need. You've got McCULLEY. Yeah, I don't know, benching him, and you've got Marsh. And I would say if we're just throwing names out there without seeing practice or anything else, maybe a little Browder could be something. A guy that is probably dropping a lot of balls in practice. That's why he's not getting his shot. He dropped 2 in the spring game, and it may be when you're thinking about, okay, we're putting the pressure on these guys during the week. It's there for the taking. I got to believe that these guys, they would love to play Browder. I got to believe that he can't do anything in practice. I got to think the same thing with Bell. I mean, when nobody's making any plays, come on, look at Marsh. Jumped in there and took it and ran with it. Well, let me just give you my final thoughts. Michigan wins this game, and they had a good first quarter, not so good a second quarter, and then it came down to the first possession in the third quarter, which was clearly the turning point in the game, where Michigan goes up 17-7. Justice Haynes goes in for the touchdown, but just a couple plays before that, Bryce Underwood gets strip sacked, and this game is turned. Spartan Stadium is going to be on fire, and Michigan's going to be in a dogfight. But State was offsides. A controversial play, controversial in that it was really close. Controversial if you're on the State side because you'd had calls going against you in the first half, and some tough ones. And, it happens in big games, and we've seen it happen to Michigan repeatedly against Michigan State. So that's got to be tough to take from the other side. But from the Michigan side, it felt like the game was over, even though it wasn't. That's what happens when you fumble the ball, and that's what happens when you're going 3 and out. And that's what happens when you start to give up big plays. But I think you relaxed a little bit. I think you did it as a fan watching that game, and I think you also did when Michigan's defense had Childs backed up to his end zone. You could see he had happy feet, and they were smashing them, and they didn't seem like they were going to get anything going. And then when they made it 24-7, it seemed like it was over. But I think the takeaway in this one is that Michigan's defense is good. Yeah, they've got, this was a very winnable game, and they won it. Purdue's a very winnable game. So is Northwestern, and so is Maryland. So if this team wants to make the playoffs, they get a chance to beat Ohio State. I think that almost everyone watching this, no matter how you feel about Samaj Morgan dropping the ball or Bryce Underwood, running around with pizzazz and panache when he's throwing the ball off balance. However you feel about that, like, oh, he's just going to be great. Just a matter of time. Just get his feet under him because, he's the greatest. Maybe that's true. I think a lot of people are banking on that, but sometimes when you've got the Porsche, you just got to slam that right foot down and, you let it go crazy. But a lot of freshman quarterback. He looks like a freshman quarterback. He looked like a freshman quarterback tonight. Great, talented freshman quarterback, but looked like one. And, but this time was in a win. So you're like, hey, you can use those as learning experiences, especially in a win. So good win for Michigan. And I think that they're going to win their next 3, and they're going to set up that they have to win these next 3. All of this stuff that I'm sitting here today and people are happy, it all goes down the drain. They lose to Purdue or Northwestern or Maryland. And the last game is going to feel like a real drag. But I'm looking forward to 3 more victories in a row, setting up a great week against Ohio State. Maybe they can do what they did last year. Shock the world. It wasn't a shock in 23. It was a little bit of a shock because it was on the road in 22, but and it was a shock in 21 just because they hadn't won in so long. But is it really going to be a shock if Michigan beats Ohio State again? I mean, so that's what we're hopefully on a collision course for. That's how I'm feeling about things. That's where I'm at. We will get to some basketball. I see, Michigan go blue 1, 2, 3, 4. MJJ is incredible. I had watched the majority of the first half. Michigan was turning the ball over left and right. Seemed a lot like last year's team, but I probably would have watched more of it if I didn't get the news that. So I've got Big Ten Plus, and I was complaining about Big Ten Plus last week. And one of my complaints was that I couldn't go back and watch the game. I couldn't record it for myself. And somebody said, no, you can access the game right on their website. You'll be able to go back and watch it. I was like, oh. So that's my plan. Maybe tomorrow morning, at some point tomorrow, to be able to get that game in and watch. They beat St. John's tonight, which is good. A high-scoring game and all that. It'll be interesting to see how they take care of the ball in the second half because they had double-digit turnovers in the first half. Yeah, take a breath. Michigan gets the victory. They had the buffs on Paul Bunyan. Looked pretty sweet. I like to see those pictures. They had Derek Moore's helmet on. Derek Moore, hell of a player. Hopefully Cole Sullivan will be back, and that's where I'm at. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you over on the Maize and Blue Review. Why not join up? You like talking Michigan all day, all night? That's what we do. Give you the latest news. It's fun. I guarantee you'll like it if you're a Michigan fan. You like people talking about Michigan all day? That's what we do. So, and I'm not saying anybody. I was going to say we're not jerks, not like other people that do our competition. Like, they might be jerks as people. I don't even know. I was just kidding about all of that. Just come see us. It's late. I'm not taking shots at anybody. I'm just giving you the opportunity to come on down. We'll see you over there. Michigan gets this win 31-20. So now you're sitting here with Purdue on deck, and Michigan has moved to 6-2. Number 25, Michigan will stay in the top 25 after taking care of the Spartans in East Lansing. Thanks so much for watching. If you're on the podcast, special shout out to all of you and anybody that gave their feedback. Appreciate it. If I did not get to your feedback, I apologize. But at some point when we're on live, you keep coming in, I'll get to you. Thanks so much. Have a great night. Good morning, and we'll talk with you on Monday.